There we go. So the first plugins that Pro Tools had were called Audio Suite. They were non-real-time plugins. We still use those today, and we use them for very specific things. And we're going to talk about those this morning a little bit later on. Just talk about like Audio Suite and like what they're good for and why we still use them. Then after Audio Suite, they had a plugin format called RTAS, which stands for Real-Time Audio Suite. And now they have a plugin format called AAX. In Pro Tools 12, they no longer use RTAS plugins. It's called AAX. That stands for Avid Audio Engine. And this is the current one that we use. You don't really need to know a lot about RTAS, just it's kind of interesting to know that they existed at one point. And the difference between RTAS and AAX is that RTAS plugins could only work in real time. So it used to be that when you were bouncing out your audio track in Pro Tools, you had to listen to it in real time. You couldn't do it in faster than real time. This is kind of it was super annoying actually, and it required a redesign of the engine from the engineers at Avid. So they finally did that redesign, and now we've got AAX. Audio Suite plugins are applied only to audio clips. They create a new audio file when they're rendered, and they are non-real time. And again, we're going to come back and talk about that in more detail. So Avid AAX plugins, Avid Audio Extension, sorry, not engine, extension. These work offline and in real time. And then they've got AAX DSP, which are Pro Tools and Pro Tools Ultimate. And then they have AAX Native, which are the ones you're going to be using on your computers. So that's the kind of rundown of all these plugins. And the only thing you really need to know is just to make sure that when you're buying a plugin or you're downloading a plugin from a website, that it does work in AAX. There are some companies, especially for the free stuff, that are not made for Pro Tools. If you want to use anything like a VST plugin or an Audio Units plugin, generally you can get a wrapper, WRAPPER, which is basically like a plugin that holds another plugin inside of it. And they work pretty good depending on what you're trying to do with it. One big thing that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about plugins is the track compatibility. Mono tracks can take mono plugins, but plugins on mono tracks can also be mono/stereo, and stereo tracks can only take stereo plugins. So let's just take a look at this. The session that we're using today is the one that we did for the Elastic Audio timing exercise. That is that Sharp Hand Joe session that we did a couple days ago. So we're going to be using that one today, and I will expect that you will have that you'll have completed that part of the exercise. If you haven't, it's not the end of the world, but it will help. It'll sound better. It'll be more fun to use if you're using that exercise that you already messed around with the other day. So I'm going to just go over here and do this. And all right, I'm just going to make sure that we can hear everything. Yeah, cool. Okay. All right. So in here, here's my drums that I've got going on. And first thing first is I just want to show you what I meant by that mono versus stereo. So we have a whole bunch of mono tracks in here, and we have a couple of stereo tracks in here. The inserts, the plugins, go up here in the section called inserts. And remember, an insert goes directly onto a track, and it changes everything on that track. Now, when I say that it changes the sound on that track, it doesn't always mean that it changes the sound a lot. If I put an EQ on a track, you might not really hear that EQ until I start to mess around with it, but it's still affecting the sound. So let's just go over here. I'm going to go over here and solo this overhead here. Oops. Let's turn my drums off. There we go. I'm going to solo this overhead. So here's what this one sounds like right now. You can hear it's a little bit thin. It's just the overheads going on. And what we can do is on here, let's go ahead and zoom in here. And if I click on one of these plugin slots here, it pulls up this little window here. And we have a couple things. We have no insert, we have search. We can search for a plugin. We have multi-mono, and we have multi-channel, and we have multi-mono. These are two different words for basically stereo. They're slightly different, but the differences are very minimal. We're going to talk about those in a minute. Then we can recall inserts, which is basically your track presets. If you have a setting that you want to have set up for like a whole bunch of presets at once, you can do it here. We could also mess around with our I/O here, but really you're not going to mess around with this too much here. We're really going to be just going here to these parts here. So these two parts right here are the important ones, and really, it's really this one here that says multi-channel. So in here, if we go look at these, they all say stereo next to them. Stereo, 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 stereo. See, they all say stereo. And I've got a ton of plugins that you do not have because I'm using my home computer. This is my work machine here. So one more thing before we get going too far into this is you're going to see that I have two ways to look at these plugins. I have by effect type here, EQ, dynamics, pitch shift, reverb, delay, all this stuff here. And then down here, I've got it set up with by the company that makes the plugin. So I've got all these different companies in here. So let me just go in here real quick and show you how to do this. This is not in the notes. Actually, it might be in the notes. I don't remember if it's in the notes, but I'm just going to show it to you right here under Setup, Preferences. And we're going to go in here and under where it says Display, just this first tab. See here where it says Organize Plugin Menus By. I have selected Category and Manufacturer. You have some different options here. You have Flat List, you have Category, you have Manufacturer, or you have both, Category and Manufacturer. And that's the one that I prefer to use. I think by default it just says Category by default. But I like to use Category and Manufacturer, and the reason why is because some plugins in my head, I think of them as like a plugin type. Oh, this is an EQ plugin. Oh, this is a Dynamics plugin. And some plugins I think of as, oh, that's a Soundtoys plugin, or oh, that's an Avid plugin, or oh, that's a Native Instruments plugin. I've just gotten used to thinking of it as a certain type of plugin because a certain company of plugin because maybe it doesn't easily fall into a category. For example, Melodyne. If I want to use Melodyne on here, most of the time I would just go down here to Ceremony and just grab Melodyne because Melodyne actually pulls up under Other here, but it could also come up under Pitch Shift. Realistically, it could be a pitch shift thing. So at some point, my brain just got looking at it as Ceremony. That's the company that makes it, so I usually go here and grab it. Soundtoys, same thing. I usually just go down here and grab my Soundtoys plugins because honestly, Crystallizer, Effect Rack, like where is it? Little Alter Boy. Some of these in here, like Microshift, like I don't really think about like what kind of plugin they are. I think about like that's just this plugin that I like to use. So I'll oftentimes grab those from within their name instead of in their category. So if that's what the stereo plugins look like, if we go over to a mono plugin here, I'm just going to turn that one back down to where it was. If I go over to a mono track and I click on one of these slots here, now it just says plugin. It doesn't say multi-channel plugin. It doesn't say multi-mono plugin. It just says plugin. And if I look at each one of these, we're going to see they have a lot of them that say mono, mono, mono. Some of them say mono/stereo. So you're going to see this is a difference here. So for example, if I go to the reverb, deverb here says mono, deverb mono. But then it also says deverb mono/stereo. The ones that say mono/stereo, what that means is that it converts a mono signal into a stereo signal. So the track is mono, the track stays mono, the audio on the track is mono, but when it hits this plugin, it's going to convert the audio sound that we're hearing, into stereo. And so this is really useful, especially for things like delays and choruses. So for example, a delay plugin, I might want it to be, left and right, bup, 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 left and right type of sound. And I can change that in here. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. But before I show it to you, audio-wise, whoops. Let's take a look at this here in track compatibility over here in the notes. So mono has a mono audio file, and the delay is mono, and what we hear is also mono. That's what we're looking at here in this first one right across the top here. And then this one here is mono to stereo conversion. So mono comes into it mono, and it hits that delay, which is a mono stereo, and then we're going to hear it in stereo. So let's just take a listen to what that actually does for us. I'm going to solo the snare drum. All right, so we got this here, and I'm gonna turn this up a little bit so we can hear it. Okay, so I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna put the plugin on here. It's a mono track, and I'm gonna go ahead and put a delay on here so we can hear the delay. And I'm just gonna use the Mod Delay 3, which comes with Pro Tools. So here's Mod Delay 3 in mono, and yeah, I'm not gonna use that thing. I'm just gonna go ahead and use sync it up here, and let's turn my feedback up a little bit. There we go. And now you can hear that delay is on there. Now this is mono right here. This is what a mono delay sounds like. If I change this to mono/stereo, now watch what we can do with it. So we got this here, and I'm going to click on this over here. So now check this out. Right, it changes it into a stereo signal. I'm going to go ahead and put this at, about 50%. Okay. So you can hear that it's hitting. You can hear the snare drum hitting in the middle of your headphones. And then the delay is on the left and the right. So what it's actually doing is this. It's taking that signal and it's changing it into a stereo signal. If we go back and look at the track has not changed. We're not looking at anything different. The track is this one here. It's still a mono track. The audio file is still mono. It hasn't changed the audio file, but it has changed what we're hearing in the sound coming off the track. Now, the other thing that's happened here, though, is that if we look here at what I've written, here in the mono one, if we put the delay plugin right in the middle like I've done, everything before it is going to be mono and everything after it will be stereo. So if we put it here, if we put that delay plugin right in the middle, everything before it is going to be mono and everything after it is going to be stereo. So it doesn't convert the track into a stereo track until after the plugin. So if we have it in the very beginning, everything after it would be stereo. If we have it in the middle, everything before it is going to be mono, everything after it's going to be stereo. So let's just take a look at what that looks like here on my screen. Here, if I go over here, all these plugins and before it are all mono plugins. And if I click on this over here, every plugin after it now is a stereo plugin. We have this multi-channel, multi-mono choice. And over here, they all say stereo. So for example, if I wanted to put a gate on here, let's just put a quick gate on here. Expand our gate, there we go, boom. So this gate is a mono gate, and if I put a gate here, the gate is a stereo gate. And if we look at these, we can see how they're a little bit different from each other. This one on the left is stereo, this one on the right is mono. You can see it's got two inputs here and two outputs, and this one has one input and one output, and that's how we can tell that it's stereo versus mono. All right. Okay, so just another quick word about how to insert plugins onto these tracks. Just click on this and just go over here and just insert the plugin on. If I've got a plugin on here, like I've got this gate on here, and I decide I don't want the gate, I go over here and I click on the little dot here, and I just go up to no insert, and that's how you remove plugins from your tracks. You can't just click it and hit delete. That won't work. It won't delete anything. It won't do anything. So if we want to delete a plugin, if you want to insert a plugin, you go ahead and select the plugin you want to insert. In this case, expander gate. And if I want to delete it, there we go. So let me just show you with this expander gate here. I don't know if you can hear it well. I'm going to turn it all the way up so we can hear it better. I'm going to go ahead and bypass. So you can hear the bleed from that kick drum. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that bleed. Cool. And see, notice how I'm using the threshold to adjust where it kicks in. Right? I use my attack to make it a sharper hit. I can make it fluffier. I can make it sharper here. I can adjust how much threshold, how much how much it's cutting it off. This ratio is kind of a weird one for a gate. And then the hold here holds it longer. If I want it to be a shorter snare drum, I can turn the hold down. Or, check this out, I can really chop that snare drum off. And so obviously this doesn't sound very natural. You don't really want to do that probably with stuff. There we go. Cool. And there we go, got a nice little snare gate on here. Okay, so how do you bypass them? This is a great question. There's a couple of ways to bypass. A couple of ways to bypass your effects. One way is I click the bypass button here. But what I actually do in more real-world situations is you hold down Command and click the plugin itself, and that will turn the plugin on and off. So there it is with the gate on it. And there it is with the gate off. Okay, and I can just hold down Command to bypass it. When it's blue, it's bypassed. When it's gray, it's on. All right, so I've got that there. I just realized my level on my headphones is actually quite low, so sorry if I just blasted your ears out with that. Didn't realize I was doing that, sorry. All right, so now, moving on. Stereo tracks have multi-channel plugins or multi-mono plugins. Multi-channel plugins are true stereo. There's one set of controls that changes everything left and right. Multi-mono, the left and the right can be separated. So if it's linked, one set of controls changes both left and right together. It's basically the same as a stereo plugin. If it's unlinked, the left and the right sides can be controlled independently. You would use this if you want your stereo signal to have like an EQ on one side or the other side different from each other. So for example, if I go over here to my overheads, let's go to the room sound. Okay. So this one here, if I go here and I select, I've got two options here. I've got multi-channel and multi-mono. I'm going to say that 90% of the time you're going to use multi-channel, but sometimes you will use multi-mono, especially if you want the left and the right to be a little bit different. So let's go over here and show that. I'm going to grab an EQ. I'm just going to use my 7-band EQ that comes with Pro Tools. And in here, let me just show you this twice. I'm going to go and grab a multi. There we go, boom. If you want to open up both of your plugin windows at the same time, you just hold down Shift and click them. Oh, you're back. Didn't even notice you had gone. Sorry. All right, so, but I'm glad you're back, AJ. All right, so on the left-hand side is the multi-mono plugin. On the right-hand side is the multi-channel plugin. So the multi-mono plugin here, as you can see, the only difference, they look exactly the same. The only difference is this one has this kind of left-right thing going on here. So what I can do is I can unlock them, and I can use this to kind of like decide how we're using it here, and I can control, if I want them both on, I can control which one we're actually selecting, which one we're changing based on which one I have here selected, left or right. So if I go over here and say, let's hit play. There we go. So now you see, since I turned these both off, and you can turn them on, here I'm going to link them back up and I'm going to unlink them. if I have this set like this, my left and my right, I can actually change the EQ on these, and you can hear the difference here. If I want both of them to be controlled by one side or the other, I just click this master link button here, and it says which one do you want to retain, the left or the right side. Let's go ahead and retain the left side, and now everything is both the left and the right. But if I want to decouple them, I want my left and my right to be different from each other, I can and you can get some really interesting stereo sounds going on. This is something that with a lot of so Black Book Official says those EQs are selling fun for something fast, but for unlimited bands like Pro Q. Absolutely, we're talking about a totally different thing, Black Book. We're actually just talking about basic Pro Tools stuff right now, and that's why we're using these. So just one thing to keep in mind is most companies like Logic or Ableton Live or whatever, they allow you to decouple the left and the right hand sides in the plugin itself, so they don't have a difference between multi-mono or multi-channel. Whereas with Pro Tools, if I use a multi-channel plugin, it's only stereo, so there's no way to decouple the left and the right hand sides. So if you want to have separate settings for your left and your right hand side, then you need to select multi-mono, and that's really the only reason why you're going to select multi-mono, unless you run into a plugin that you have to use multi-mono. There are a couple of plugins like that. The main one is the Trim plugin. So if I look over here, multi-channel, and I go to Other, Trim is not an option. You can see it's not even in my screen at all. If I go to multi-mono, Other, Trim is right there. So if you want to use the Trim plugin, and the Trim plugin is good for things like volume automation on a track, stuff like that. If you want to use the Trim plugin, then you have to use multi-mono. That's the main case for using multi-mono in my book, unless you're trying to separate things like left and right. But I just want to say one thing. Black Book Official brings up Pro Q. That's this one here, and I just want to show this because it is my favorite plugin in the whole world for EQs. This is right here. If you're like, Tony, should I buy an EQ? I would say absolutely, you should buy FabFilter's Pro Q3 because it's amazing. It shows you all this stuff here. I can lock in and I can grab a peak and like one separate part here. You can do all this really neat stuff. So if I want to go over here and grab this one here, see, I can see my peaks, pull it down, push it, like so much. I can even take this, and it's got come here. It's got like a compressor on here as well. We can do some really, really cool stuff with this thing. It's the best EQ for like mastering and stuff like that. Super, super good stuff. And it's basically got like a little compression thing on every single point that you put in here. You can have basically unlimited points. Yeah. AJ, get your wallet out. Absolutely, Nico. AJ, like this is, I mean, yeah. I don't usually, there's a few plugins that I do push, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on, but I'm just bringing this up. Yeah, automation. Yeah, I'm just bringing this up because Black Book Official just mentioned it. It's, but yeah, we'll come back. AJ, that's hilarious. Yeah, no, it's a good derailment. All right, so going back over here. So stereo plugins. Most Pro Tools stereo plugins are both multi-channel and multi-mono, with a couple of exceptions, and this is just what I was talking about. Multi-mono only is Trim. Multi-channel only. Some reverbs are only multi-channel. They don't have any mono or multi-mono support. It's not a big deal. Just be aware that if you don't see the plugin in your list, it may be one or the other, multi-channel only or multi-mono only. Don't panic. Breathe. Take a breath. and just go look for it somewhere else. It doesn't mean that your computer's glitching or whatever. It doesn't mean that, you know, this plugin that you paid $300 for is broken. It's not. It's just maybe it just doesn't work in one or the other. All right, let's take a look at our plugin controls. These controls are at the top of each plugin screen. These are Pro Tools controls. Just like in Logic, you have Logic controls, and in Ableton Live, you have some Ableton Live controls. But Pro Tools, both Pro Tools and Logic actually have quite a lot of controls that are specific to them. So let's just take a look at these. Here, it doesn't matter which plugin I pull up. Here, I'm just gonna pull up some whatever plugins in here. Gray compressor. Hello, gray compressor. And over here, let's grab some of these. Oh, also, just so you know, Sound Toys is running a sale on Radiator right now. The Sound Toys Radiator plugin, which is it's like an amp. It's like a mixer amp modulation thing. It's $29 right now. That's a great price for it. So highly recommend checking that out for 29 bucks. It's great. I'm gonna turn the noise off. There we go. All right, anyway, if I open up all of these are all different types of plugins here. And the only one that comes from Pro Tools is this one right here, but you can see across the top, this section here, this section over here, this section down here, these all have the same parts to them. So I'm just gonna look at one of them so it's not confusing. This one right here is what we'll be looking at here. And we're gonna be diving into this stuff here. So over here we have 3 sections across the top. We have the track, the preset, and the automation section here. The track section really deals with what track you're actually looking at. Now, you might be saying, wait, why is that? We just know what track we're looking at. Well, the reason why this is important is for when you're using a controller. If you're using the Control 24, which is the old one, or the S6 or something like that, any kind of controller that you have for Pro Tools that's an Avid controller, this will matter where your track is. Because the controller, the different knobs and faders and stuff will control different parts of your plugin, and you can actually flip through different plugins just by going in this section here. You don't actually need to click on the plugin in Pro Tools. You can just go over here and check this track section out. So what are we looking at here? This first one here is the track name. So if I click on this, I can see all my tracks here. Boom, 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 all the different tracks. And then the second A shows all your different inserts, A through J. There's 10 inserts, which means you can have 10 plugins on a track. So this would just show me here. So for example, if I go over here and I put a plugin on it, let's just put let's put a compressor on here. Let's use the Devil Lock. And down here, if I put a let's put like an EQ on it. We'll use a the H3000 Factory. Boom. Okay, so we have these different things here. If I have them all open, we have them all right here, and I can lock which one I'm actually messing with right here. But if I wanted to, here, check this out. What I can do is I can have them show up in this window by clicking on whichever one I want to look at in the window here. So that's going to show me which one I'm looking at in the window. So we don't need to close this window down. And again, this is really useful for when you're using controllers. So these first two here are just showing us 1, this is the track, and 2, this is the insert slot. 3 here is the actual plugin that's on that insert slot. So if I go down here and I say, oh, I've got my H3000 EQ, I don't really want to use that EQ. Let's use a different EQ. So I can go over here to my plugin. I can say, all right, we're going to use this. Let's go down here and use the let's use an API here. Boom, we'll just use one of these. There we go. So now we have that EQ there. So I can change my EQ around, and I'll often use this for when I'm Decapitator. Yeah, Decapitator is the magic sauce. We will definitely be getting to Decapitator at some point today. So in here are my different, all my different plugins in here, and I can just go ahead and choose what plugin I want to stick on here. So that's what we're looking at here in the upper left-hand corner. the track selector selects the track you're looking at. The slot selector selects the plugin slot, and the plugin selector changes the currently loaded plugin. That's all right here. Track selector, slot selection, and plugin selector. That's what we're looking at. Next, over here is our presets. And we talked about the presets at one point when we were talking about our click. So let me just pull up the click track here. And we can see we've already done some, I've already made a couple presets here, but we can make a couple more to show you how this works. So in here, this section here will have different presets for it. And not all plugins do their presets the same way. It depends on the company, how they utilize the presets in Pro Tools or Logic, stuff like that. So we go in here. Here's my presets for my gate. There's a few presets here that came with it. If I go here and check out the Devil Lock, we can see the presets in the Devil Lock are actually done differently. They've got a preset selector here. The reason why companies do that is so that they can have their own kind of preset, their way to do it for within the company to make like life easier programming. So that way they don't have to program a separate setup for Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, React, FL Studio, whatever, Cubase, any of those, Reaper, all those. They just have one preset way of loading things up, and that's just everything within their company does it like that. So Native Instruments is like that, Sound Toys is like that. Most companies actually have their own preset thing in here. So if I go in here and I wanted to use this, get some of these presets in here, I could grab these presets in here, and it has, save as, organize, all that stuff. But for example, the UAD plugins here, the UAD plugins have their own way to do presets down here. But, oh, hello there, glitch. But they also have the standard ones that come with like Pro Tools, Ableton Live, Logic, all that stuff there. So in here, we can get to them in Pro Tools as well, right up here in the preset menu. So if we go and click on these presets, this is what that does. The presets is they just kind of go through and change the settings for that, for all the knobs and stuff like that on here. Okay, that's what a preset does. It just loads up different sounds for that particular plugin that you've got in here. So if we just go through here, let's see. That's our snare drum. All right, I'm gonna solo this out. So now, we can hear different settings. Right. Cool. So, we can go in here, we can mess around with these, play with these to kind of get a little sound. Right? And that's our presets in here. We're just going through these presets here. But for example, this one here uses the presets in Pro Tools. And so I've got my plus and minus here. And we can say, right, there we go. And it's always a good idea, I think, especially when you're getting a new plugin, to try out the presets and just to kind of see what kind of sounds the plugin is capable of, what you can do with it. But it's also important to understand how to use the plugin itself so you're not just relying solely on the presets. Presets can be super, super helpful when you're messing around with compression and stuff like that. So let me go ahead and let's go ahead and grab this. It's not, the Devil Lock's not really a dynamic, is it? It's kind of a weird thing to call it dynamic. So I'm just going to go here and grab my Dyne 3 compressor limiter, which is the compressor that comes with Pro Tools. I'm not a huge fan of this compressor by any means. It's not my favorite compressor at all, but it's a good place to start for just learning how to use stuff and kind of learning what compressors do. And a lot of people, especially at this point in the game where y'all are right now, are super confused about compression. So we will talk about compression. I'm gonna draw it out for you and yeah, basically anything from FabFilter is amazing. We can just like lay it at that. Anything from FabFilter is amazing. FabFilter stuff is awesome. But in here, so if I go through this, let's go here and let's go to snare drum. Let's just hear what their preset for a snare drum would be, and just listen to it and see what it sounds like. I'm going to go ahead and mute this one here. Right now, when we're messing with a compressor preset, what we really want to do is we want to adjust the threshold so we can hear what the compressor is actually doing. And when you're working with compression, unless you're really solid about how you're working with compression, you don't really want it to go over more than -3 dB or maybe -6 dB gain reduction at the top of things. And again, absolutely, AJ, I'll make a list of plugins that we recommend for you, 100%, yes. And what I'll do is I'll just hire out Black Book Official to do it, because I can already tell we've got this person has a good sense of cool plugins. So really, when you're working with presets, especially for compression, you need to, yeah, exactly, get your loss and loans ready. You need to make sure that you do have your finger on the threshold, but that's about it, because the threshold is where we're going to really kick in that compression or not, depending on the audio level that's going into it. So in this case, the snare drum is not particularly loud, so we want to make sure that threshold is actually pretty far down. And you hear that really hard pop on it, so that's like way too much compression. Right, it's like that. Maybe turn this gain up a little bit. Boom. And then we can just kind of go through this. There we go. And so we can, by using these presets, we can kind of get some things and we can, oh, that sounds pretty cool, whatever. But then we could go through and take a look and see what it's actually doing. Like this API, for example, if you flip through these, you'll see these two knobs. Whoa, these are two knobs, and they're changing depending on what setting I've got. Well, I can click and grab the knobs and move them up and down. And this one here. So for example, with this one here, what's happening is the inner knob, just like on a regular API, the inner knob is our frequency, and the outer knob is our gain reduction or adding. See that, how that works there? And it's really, it's a weird thing, and I've had students who have actually purchased some of these in the past, and they're like, wait, I don't understand this at all. What's actually happening here? And then I can go through and explain it. But if you flip through some of the presets of these, you start to get a sense for how it works. Also, another thing that really helps a lot is the manual. Whenever I buy a new plugin, if I don't really understand, like with an EQ, it's like, okay, I get it, I'll just use it. But if I'm using like a new synth plugin or something like that, I always put the manual on my phone as a PDF and my iPad and my phone, and I'll read them on the train as I'm traveling around the city and stuff, just whenever I'm going somewhere, because you start to really unlock the potential when you read the manual. Read, RTFM, read that manual, whenever you can. UAD, yeah. UAD is, yeah, AJ, you want something to spend some money on? Yeah, let's talk UAD. So just speaking of just try to figure it out. You know what, Black Book, I agree. I usually do try to figure it out on the go, but it's just, I don't know, I nerd out about some of this stuff so much, especially synthesizers, some of the bigger ones. I'm sending out resumes to the black market organ donations. Apparently they pay pretty well. Actually, just since we're here talking about stuff, a really good set of plugins to get that I would recommend actually is Slate Digital. You can get those for about I think it's $150 a year. It's a subscription service, but for $150 a year, you can get all their different plugins they make, and they've got these here. The virtual mix rack comes with a whole bunch of really cool plugins. So if I load in what does the UAD run for? UAD is a multi-part system. UAD, first of all, you need hardware to run UAD, and then each plugin costs anywhere from $100 to $300 or $400, or each group of plugins. But the Slate stuff, I've gotten into this recently. I haven't used it that much yet, but a lot of people love Slate. It's had really excellent reviews, and you can They get great sounding plugins for effects. And then Black Book says Pigment, Serum, Silence, Spire, Vital. I don't know Vital. But I have all the other ones. I don't have Viper, but I have the first 4 on that list there. But let's do this. Let's come back to that discussion because AJ, I think it will. I think it will, buddy. Just keep sending those pictures out to people's cell phones, and I'm sure you'll get a bite one day. So let's continue on though. I want to get through this, and then we'll come back and we'll explain all the different stuff here. So that's your presets. Now, a couple things in the presets is we've got this. If I click on this here, we've got this little button here. Will pull up our preset list. Any presets that are put into the Pro Tools preset category will go in here, and I can just click through and I can try them out. It'll change the sounds. If I move it over here, we can see that it's going to flip those around. So you can just click on these. It's like a list for you. If I want to save my own preset, so let's say I've got this and I make a setting and I change some stuff and I wanna that's my preset setting. That's like, oh, I love that preset. I want to keep that. I want it to be on every snare drum, whatever. Then I can go up here to the preset dialog, this little area here, the settings menu, and I can save the settings. I can also import other settings if I wanted to. And you got over here your settings preferences as well. But what I can do is I can go, okay, let's save this. So I'm going to call this one, I'm going to go save as. I'm going to call this one Tony Snare. In here, if I wanted to, I can make a new folder. It will pull up a folder for me. But there we go. Boom! I hit that. I hit save, and now in my list, I've got a preset called Tony Snare. Now, once I save this, if I want to make this my default setting, which means that anytime I pull up this plugin, it's going to automatically go to this setting here. I can click on this arrow and I say set as user default, and now that'll be my default setting. Every time I pull that up, it should pull this up. Sometimes this does work a little bit weird if your computer's set up kind of strange. You've got some locks on some things that maybe you don't want to have locked or whatever. But if you're on your home computer and you're not like on a studio computer or something, it should work pretty well. So let me just show you this. Over here, this is what I did here with this click. I'm not a huge fan of the click straight out of the box. And I made my own click here. So let's say, for example, that I want to make a click that's using the rim shot of a snare drum. So I can just go over here like this, boom, boom, boom. Right, so there's that. Let's say I love that, or I want to have my click 2 be my, let's see, can we change that? Oh, okay, this is just the setting here. Let's turn that off, follow meter, turn this. So I can have this like that. And let's say I like that setting. So what I can do is I can go over here, I can go save as, and we'll call this one Tony Rimshot 8ths. And now that'll pop up right here. Tony click 2, OG block 8ths. So if I click on this one, there's that, or the one I just made. And I could have that come up. Let's do this in here. It's like the same as my OG block, but go over here and set this as my user default. And now whenever I pull up that click, let's see if it works. I don't remember if it was working before or not. If I pull up this click, it should pull up that setting. No, mine's not set up to, mine's like, it's not doing the, oh, interesting. I'm not sure why, let's see. Why it's not doing my user default, why it's doing my factory default. Oh, here we go, set plugin default to user setting. There we go, all right, cool. There we go, boom. So now every time I pull this up, it should recall my setting, instrument, click 2. Awesome. There we go. And so certain plugins, for example, like this EQ1, EQ1 basically serves one purpose, and that is as a high pass. And usually I just set it around 100, whoops. Boom, like that. And it's got this one purpose, and this is basically what I want to have it set for all the time. It always defaults to some kind of like, I don't know, something in the middle. And I don't ever use it for that. I literally just use this to cut out the low frequencies of like vocals and stuff like that. So what I would do with this is set this up. Here is my, let's save this as, boom, and we'll make a new folder under here, tuning settings, and we'll just call this one high pass filter 100 hertz, like that. Boom, there we go. And now set as the user default, make sure it's going to pull up my user settings. There we go, good. So now every time I pull up this EQ, it's going to go right to that setting. Boom. Yeah, it's a single band EQ, absolutely. So this one is actually a filter, yeah, but it's not really a filter like, it's not quite as nice and musical as like a normal. If you actually want to use like a filter, like a musical filter, use an actual filter, and the one that comes with Pro Tools that's really nice is this one here, the vintage filter here. But if you just need a cut, then just use that one. And oftentimes I'll just need a cut on my vocals, and there you go. Some EQs do come with resonance. Yep. But that's a different discussion. Let's not get sidetracked here. All right. Okay, so that's that there, the presets. There you go. That's your presets. That's all the stuff to do with the presets setting menu. Just going through the list of stuff here, presets changes the settings of the plugin, plus and minus moves through the presets one by one. List pulls up a list. Compare flips back and forth. If you edit it, you change it, you hit the compare button to go back and forth. The preset settings menu allows you to save, copy, paste, and import plugin settings. And you can also set a user default setting here. The user default, you must save your setting as a preset before you set it as a user default. So I've seen people try to like, they make some changes and they try to save that as the user default, but nothing happens because you need to it's actually grayed out. You need to actually save it first. Auto enable allows you to automate parameters within the plugin. You must enable parameters in Pro Tools in order to automate them. And then auto enable plugins. When you auto enable a parameter, a green dot or box appears in the plugin for that control. Mostly it only works for Pro Tools plugins and a few third-party plugins. Okay, so let's just talk about that real quick. If I wanted to automate my one-band EQ, so I've got over here, let's say I've got my one-band EQ on, here, I'm gonna do something here real quick. Let's take you, turn you off, turn these ones off here for a second. I don't need them in here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all these drums and I'm gonna run them into a single track here. We're gonna call this one drum group. I'm going to take all my drums here and run them into my drum group here, boop, like that. There we go. So now all my drums are going into this single track right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little filter on this track, and the whole reason we're going to do this right now is so that I can show you some automation. I don't really expect you to do this along with me. Just kind of watch me for a second. And don't follow along with this one here, but boom. Okay, so in here we got this. Now we can put this filter on here and we can mess with all of our drums, right? So if I want to automate this cutoff, so over time as I play the track, I've got my little loop section right here. Let's do this. Right, let's say I want to automate this to kind of go up and down automatically for me. Well, what I can do is click on this auto button here, and now it pulls up a list of what I can automate. So I just double click anything over here that I want to put into this list over here. Anything that I want to automate, I have to tell Pro Tools to do it. So I just go over here and say, okay, I want to automate the cutoff. Now, in order for this to work properly, really, you need to understand what all these controls are. Otherwise, it's going to be a big mystery. Like all these names over here, what is this? What's the ENV attack, ENV release, ENV depth, all this stuff here, LFO sync. Wait, what are you talking about, Tony? What is all this stuff? Well, I know what it is, and eventually you will know what it is too, but right now that might be a big mystery. So a lot of these things it's a little bit weird to use if you don't already know what you're doing with this stuff. So for right now, I just want to trust me, what we want to use is the cutoff here. I'm going to hit OK, and now we're going to see this little green light, this little dot lit up on here. What this dot means is that this plugin is now, this parameter is now auto-enabled. I can now automate it. Fat is definitely drive, yep. So we're gonna go over here, and I can mess with this, and what I can do is I can use down here, if we go down here in my list, we can see now my filter just popped up, and cutoff is one of the parameters that's there now. And I can go in here and I can automate this. Now, we're not talking about automation today. Today is not the automation day, but I just want to show you what you can do with this. There we go, we can automate that, boom. Oops, not like that, let's go like this. Yep. Automation day is actually Monday. So come back on Monday and we'll be talking about automation. But today is not automation day. But we can go through and you can see what I'm doing with it. And I could also go in here and automate it by hand. Pro Tools does not have curvature for the automation. It's one thing that Pro Tools doesn't do. It's a really weird thing. Or at least it hasn't up until, I haven't seen it. Let's see if they have a right click on here now. Do they have a right click on it for? No. Yeah, no curve yet. Now, there is a curve tool in here for the pencil tool, but this does not, unfortunately, allow us to curve these things here. It only is for tempo changes. It's a weird thing. They've got it under the pencil tool, but it's not actually for automation. It's only for when you're doing tempo automation. So but honestly, like realistically, it's not the end of the world. Although I do use my curve a lot when I'm using Ableton Live, and my main DAW is Ableton Live, but really, it's not a deal breaker for as much other stuff as Pro Tools does right. That one thing is not the end of the world. So, but that's automation in a nutshell, and that's how we get to it with our plugins. Now, one more thing though, if you are using a Pro Tools specific plugin, you actually do not need to go through all this stuff. Yep, hit remove. You do not need to go through all this stuff. What you can do, and this is in the notes right here, is you can use the claw. Remember we talked about the claw? The claw is the claw. I'm coming after you with the claw. It's Control, Option, Command, and the reason why I call it the claw is because if you look at your keyboard, Control, Option, and Command are right next to each other, and you push all three of them down, it looks like your hand is making a claw, like you've got little Tyrannosaurus Rex hands, right? So if you claw click a parameter, and this, again, this only works with native plugins that come with Pro Tools and some third-party plugins, not all of them. Some of them do this, some of them don't. You just have to try it out. But if I claw click, hold down the claw, click it, and it pulls it up and it says enable automation for this parameter here, for cutoff. So I don't need to know what these are. If I want to automate it, I just do that, and now I can automate it, or I can turn it off the same way. I can disable the automation for it. So one more time, for things that come with Pro Tools, it works great. For other stuff, for example, if I pull up a UAD plugin, let's go down here to UAD and let's grab the Moog plugin, which is another filter. We'll use the regular one. Boom. So this is the Moog filter. right? So this one here does not have the ability to use that claw. So if I claw click on the cutoff, it doesn't do anything. It just kind of bounces it back and forth with stuff. So unfortunately, it's like a compare feature, and that's the programming in the UAD plugins. So with UAD plugins, I would have to hit auto and then figure out what it is that I want to automate, and then just and double click it and put it over there. So that's the only way we can do it. And there's no green light, there's no box, there's nothing like that, just because of the plugin maker. SW says, what is the difference between the green light? So the green light, if it's green, that means it's auto enable is turned on. But if it's red, that means I actually have some kind of automation write mode selected. So here I've got auto touch turned on, so it's red. That means that if I touch it, it's actually going to start writing automation. Right? But if it's green, it means it's just reading the automation. But again, this is actually stuff we're gonna cover on Monday's class, because Monday's class is all about automation. Today's class is really about the plugins themselves. So that's what this is. Please remember this stuff, because we're going to be dealing with this a lot on Monday. Today's class directly comes into Monday's class. Now, one last thing in here is, if I've done automation and I love my automation and I just want to make sure that I don't accidentally do more automation, I can click the Safe button. That Safe button means that I cannot add any more automation to this particular plugin at this moment. If I want to automate it more, I have to turn this off. So it's kind of like an automation lock on that plugin. Yep, super cool. So that's what that does there. And then again, we have bypass here. Bypass, the shortcut for bypass is you hold down Command and click the plugin name, and see how it turns blue. That's what that is. Now, there are two ways to bypass plugins in Pro Tools. If you hold down Command, you can just bypass it. But if I wanted to actually deactivate a plugin, hold down Command and Control. Boom, there you go. Black Book says, I never used Pro Tools, but it seems pretty straightforward. Absolutely it is, and this is one of the reasons why I love Pro Tools. I gotta ask you, actually, let me just ask you a question, Black Book. Do you use Logic? What DAW do you currently use mostly to make your music or record or whatever you're doing? FL Studio or Studio One. Okay, cool. I've actually never used FL Studio, just because FL Studio, it only had a Mac version in the last couple of years. I keep saying that I'm going to get a copy of it because I am curious about it. Mostly I use Ableton Live. And then Studio One, I've heard people talk about Studio One. I'm also actually quite curious about the new one from UAD, just because I live very firmly in the UAD ecosystem. But you're 100% right. Pro Tools is very straightforward, and that's why I like it. I was kind of wondering if you maybe used Logic, because Logic and Pro Tools are very similar in how they work with stuff. Yeah, okay, no problem. Just send me your address. So basically, let's see here. Let's see what we got going on here. Yeah, so let's do this. Let's take a break. Let's take 10 minutes. Oh, Cubase? Yeah, I haven't used Cubase since version, oh man, whatever they had in 1997. 1997 to 1999 is when I used Cubase, like, all the time. I don't even remember what version it was, like Cubase VST. I don't even think they had numbers yet. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's be back at 10:55, and we're going to talk about Audio Suite plugins. All right, y'all. Cool. See you in a bit.